started with today's lesson. This is our final genre, the argue genre. Tell me, what are the other genres we've learned so far? Call one out. Procedure. Information. That looks like it was really scripted because you all said this in the same order, but that's okay. So yeah, you just talked about that before the break. You just talked about those three, and hopefully it got your memory about those three genres: the procedure, the information, and the explanation. We're going into our final genre for the semester, argue. And just like with the other genres, there are different text types, okay? Hopefully before the break, you talked about the different text types when you were talking to your partner about those different genres. Today we're going to talk about three text types with the argue genre. The first one is exposition, the second one is discussion, and the third is review. And my hope is that you'll be able to use, analyze, and teach language in your subject area related to these text types. Now, as just a quick preview, these two are going to be very closely related, as you will see. This one is going to be kind of separate. I think in some subjects, these two will work nicely, and in other subjects, this one will work nicely. And just as a reminder, because this class has all different subjects, not all text types will be compatible with every subject. But hopefully, between at least those two groups, you'll find something that works in your subject. So as we talked about in the break, and as you just said, we've talked about procedure genre, we've talked about information, explanation, and now here we are in argument. So what is argument? Argument is about telling your point of view on something. I want you to think about your subject for a second. When would students tell their point of view? Now I want to contrast this before I let you discuss. Information is very objective. The information genre is very objective. It says what something is. We don't include opinions in that. It is what it is. Same with explanation. We tell why something happens or how a phenomenon happens. It's very objective. This is how it happens. But with argument, we get into the more subjective, the opinion. Okay? So for example, is Dr. Graham your favorite professor? Oh, I guess that's pretty objective, isn't it? The answer is just yes. Yeah, okay. Sorry, bad example. It's about your opinion. It's about things where people can have different answers, okay? So turn to the person next to you. I want you to take 30 seconds. Tell them something in your subject where students can have an opinion on something, where they can say their view. Go, tell the person next to you. But let's talk about the text types. So as a reminder, your context is we're trying to argue. Three different text levels. First one is exposition. And that's where you're going to argue one position. Okay? So in an exposition text type, you're only presenting one side of the issue. All right? We'll go back to our example. Dr. Graham is a great professor. You would only present the positive side, everything he does well. His accent is just so beautiful and nice to listen to. His choice of colors of shirt are just provide this calmness in the room, and most importantly, his jokes are hilarious. That's the exposition, where you only present one side. I just introduced three text types for the argue genre: exposition, discussion, and review. Turn to the person next to you. Tell them your understanding so far about those three text types. Go. Any questions about that? I did see some confused faces. Any questions so far? Yes, Teresa.
What's the difference between the two verbs in exposition, argue, and discussion?
It's arbitrary. Well, because I guess I chose that, argue, because you are really going heavy on one position. And as we talk about it, as we talk about the details of the stages, you're going to see that when you're doing the exposition, you're really trying to convince someone of something, okay? But with the discussion, you are presenting both sides. So you're not really, I guess I chose argue and present here, the two different verbs, because I was trying to emphasize, one is about pushing a position, one is about giving both sides, and not necessarily letting the reader decide, because you'll see that you will present something at the end. We'll talk about that when we get to stages, but I think that's the reason. Thank you. Other questions? Now, I think I told you this in a previous class when I told you, okay, next week we're going to do argue. And I told you that this could be one of the most difficult genres for you as a bilingual teacher. And there's going to be two reasons why I think it's difficult. One is going to be from a cognitive perspective, and one is going to be from a language perspective. Let's talk about the cognitive perspective first. So here is our good friend Benjamin Bloom's taxonomy. You should be very familiar with him at this point and his work. Based on this, and based on what you know about argue right now, why do you think I would say argue might be the most difficult of the genres we've talked about? Think about where procedure is, think about where inform is, think about where explain is. Why might I say argue is the most difficult cognitively? Take a minute, talk to the person next to you. Using this as your guide, why might I say that? Go. When we talk about these different genres, let's do inform for a second. So remember, inform answers the question, what something is. You very much can do the what something is at the remember and understand level. Does that mean inform does not use these other levels as well? No, it doesn't mean that. But you can express the inform at these levels where you describe something or you define something. Same with the explain genre. The explain genre can, at those levels, be expressed. It doesn't mean that when you're doing explanations, you don't go to these other levels. It simply means that these levels are compatible with those genres. But I don't think argue is. Because to be able to argue one side or to be able to argue two sides, you're going to have to analyze some information. You've got to analyze different sides, and then you've got to evaluate those different sides. And the same thing when we talk about review, when you are reviewing a performance. Of course you have to know what makes a good piece of art, what makes good music, what makes a good defensive strategy, or what makes good teaching. You have to know those things, but you also have to evaluate to actually do the genre. And so cognitively, to be able to do this genre, you have to be at those other levels. Whereas the explain and the inform, they can be done at these lower cognitive levels. Okay, let's talk about the language part. I know the text is small here, but I think you've already downloaded the slides. I see some of your eyes drooping on this Monday morning. So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to stand up. I'd like you to do the same thing. Okay, so here we have the CEFR. Descriptors for spoken production. I want you to read through those with a partner. Go find someone new, someone you have not talked to today. Someone you have not talked to today. They always talk to each other no matter what. Don't do that we have video evidence if you don't follow the instructions. All right. What I'd like you to do, go find someone you haven't talked to today. Look at these descriptors, and why might I feel that linguistically argue may be the most difficult? Go. But Kevin, I think, latched on to this. I can give I can briefly give reasons and explanations for opinions and plans. This is the first time in this sequence that we start to see the words opinions, okay, and explanations and reasons. And of course, that is part of the argue genre. So if we take this for what it is, now it's just a reference, it doesn't have to be this way, but according to this reference, it is at the B1 level that students can independently, let me emphasize that word again, independently, without support, start to give reasons and explanations for their opinion. So what does all of this mean for you as bilingual teachers? Well, it could mean several things. But I think the first thing is that you have to have reasonable expectations about what your students can do linguistically in these different text types. And you've got to provide support for them if you want them to be able to do the argue genre. Because I think some bilingual teachers will get frustrated. They'll think, oh, I want my students to express their opinions. I really want this, but oh, they just can't do it. What I want you to understand is kind of how this falls in the sequence of their development. That it is at the B1 level that it's independent. And that it does require a lot of cognition to be able to do this type. Now, does that mean you cannot do it? No. Especially because you are a bilingual teacher. You're not an EMI teacher. The policy allows you flexibility at the secondary level to teach bilingually. So, you must create opportunities for cognitively challenging learning experiences. Argue being one type of cognitively challenging learning experience. And you're going to have to decide how much of that is done in English and maybe how much of it is done in Mandarin. Maybe you do part of it in English at the linguistic level where they are with the support, but then you give other things. You do other things in Mandarin. Okay? Questions on that? I'd like you to get into groups by subject. So music people get with music people, art people get with art people, PE. I want you to stand up. If you're an English teacher, find a group of friendly people. See who's smiling the most on this Monday morning, who looks the least bored. Go with that group, because they'll be the most fun. I want you to stand up, and I want you to make a list, not just of subjects where you would give an opinion, because we already did that. But I actually want you to think more about this dichotomy of exposition and discussion. Are there any subjects are there any topics in your subject where you might just present one side? And are there topics where you'd present both sides? Stand up. Go find someone, go find your group, go find your subject group. I'm getting a lot of questions about what does appeal mean. The laughs tell me that that's a common question. If somebody asked you what appeal means, could any of you tell me? Yeah, I just answered the question for you, so tell me what it is.
It's to tell the people what you want them
To do. Yeah. It's basically appealing to them to tell them what you want them to do. Because remember, in the exposition, are we presenting one side or two sides? One side. And we're presenting one side because, well, we believe in that. That's what we want them to do. Okay? We want the students to eat healthy. So the appeal is, you should eat healthy foods. So I want to put this up, and then we'll continue our conversation after the break. Whether you are doing an exposition or discussion, I think it is important for you to guide your students in identifying arguments. One way to help students identify arguments is this acronym HELPS. So when we talk about ways to support our students' language and to support their thinking, HELPS can be a way to do that. So what is HELPS? HELPS has 5 different categories. And the first one is historical. If we're arguing for a reason for or against something, are there historical reasons? Things in history, things in law, things in politics. So for example, if we take smoking, should 16-year-olds smoke? Well, from a law perspective, the answer is no. You can't smoke at 16. Okay? Next one is economic. Are there economics reasons for or against something? Time, money, and resources. We'll go into more details after the break. I want to quickly introduce each of these. The next one is literary. Are there things in literature? Is there a story about a boy smoking that might be a reason to convince us not to? Are there movies, arts, aesthetics, things that give us an argument for or against something? Personal. It's based on experiences, it's based on your ethics, it's based on religion. This is what students normally do. When they do an argument, they talk about personal reasons. Oh, smoking smells bad. I think it smells bad, or something like that. What HELPS does is try to expand their thinking away from the personal. Again, we'll talk more details after the break. The final is scientific. Are there studies that support your position? For example, studies on smoking. Are there data, facts about smoking that would convince us for or against it? That's the scientific side, okay? So this is just a brief introduction: historical, economic, literary, personal, scientific. We'll talk details after the break and how you can use this in your bilingual classroom. Enjoy your break. Thank you.